Part 1. A world without a switch. Imagine this. April 28, 2025. The lights flicker and die. Across Germany, metro lines freeze mid-tunnel. Across Spain, taps run dry. Supermarkets seal shut, phone networks collapse, and as darkness falls, millions sit in a silence so heavy it feels alive. No heat, no internet, no light. We call this a disaster, a grid failure. But to a medieval peasant, this wasn't catastrophe, it was normal life. While we panic in the dark, checking dead phones and watching food spoil, our ancestors would barely have raised an eyebrow. And that's because the story we were taught about them is wrong. The Middle Ages were not an era of stagnation. Modern thermodynamics, building science, and microbiology now reveal something astonishing. Medieval people weren't primitive, they were brilliant. They built homes that heated themselves, preserved food without electricity, purified water using biology instead of chemicals, and designed tools so efficient that many are now restricted or outright banned by modern regulations. So today, we're uncovering 10 medieval survival tricks that the modern world forgot, but scientists now say were pure genius. From stone heat batteries that outperform today's furnaces to architectural weapons built into castle walls, these methods didn't just help people survive harsh centuries, they helped them thrive. This is more than history. This is a blueprint for resilience in a fragile modern world. Welcome to Historia Prime. Let's bring the forgotten wisdom back to life. Part 2. Trick number 1. The masonry heat battery. Let's begin with a mystery from the coldest chapter of European history. Between 1300 and 1850, the Little Ice Age froze rivers solid and pushed winter temperatures across Russia and Scandinavia to minus 40 degrees. In that world, losing your fire wasn't discomfort, it was death. And yet, medieval families stayed warm without the metal stoves we rely on today. In fact, the solution that kept them alive is so effective that modern building codes quietly pushed it aside. This was the masonry heater, also known as the Kachelofen. While a metal stove burns hot and fast, wasting most of its energy up the chimney, the masonry heater behaves like a thermal battery. Weighing hundreds or even thousands of kilograms, it contains a winding maze of stone channels. Instead of letting heat escape, medieval builders forced smoke through this intricate contraflow system so the bricks could absorb every ounce of thermal energy. You load it once, burn a rapid pulse fire for an hour or two, and then you simply close the door. For the next 12 to 24 hours, the stones release a gentle, radiant warmth, steady, silent, almost sun-like. Modern tests confirm these designs reached up to 98% efficiency, while a typical fireplace struggles to reach even 15%. So why don't we all have one today? Because modern homes aren't built to support them. Lightweight construction and strict building codes make these multi-ton heaters non-compliant. We traded a system that could heat a home for generations for thin metal stoves that rust out in 20 years. This wasn't primitive technology. It was genius banned by convenience and forgotten by design. And it's only the beginning. Part 3. Trick number 2. The Grubenhaus, the Earth's embrace. To understand the second forgotten survival secret, we travel back to the year 1317, a year carved into European memory as the Great Famine. For 3 relentless years, rain drowned the fields, crops collapsed, and animals froze where they stood. Entire villages faced starvation. Yet archaeologists uncovered a strange pattern. The communities that survived best weren't the wealthiest or the most powerful. They were the ones living in small, humble structures called Grubenhäuser. A Grubenhaus was a simple idea executed with extraordinary insight. Instead of building on top of the earth, Medieval families dug their homes down into it, just half a meter, sometimes a bit more. It looked primitive, but the physics behind it, pure brilliance. Modern homes constantly fight the cold. If the temperature outside drops to -20 degrees, your heater must battle a 40-degree difference just to reach comfort. But the soil beneath our feet tells a different story. Only 1 meter below the surface, the Earth maintains a steady temperature of about 13 degrees Celsius, 55 degrees Fahrenheit, all year long, no matter how violent the winter becomes. By sinking their homes into the ground, medieval peasants began every day with a gift from the planet itself, a natural, stable base temperature. Instead of fighting a 40-degree gap, they only fought 7. Their fires burned less fuel, their shelters stayed warmer, and during years of famine and cold, that margin meant survival. So why don't we build this way today? The answer is not science, it's paperwork. Modern zoning laws and moisture regulations classify these structures as substandard, unfit for approval on most building permits. In our quest for convenience and uniformity, we outlawed a design that had quietly saved millions. But the medieval world understood something we've forgotten. Sometimes the strongest foundation isn't concrete or steel. Sometimes the strongest foundation is the earth itself, steady, ancient, and always warm beneath the frost. And this was only their second genius. Many more are still waiting below the surface. Part 4. Trick number 3. The engineered thatch roof. When most of us look at a thatched roof, we see nostalgia, something charming, rustic, maybe even primitive. But to a medieval peasant, that roof wasn't decoration. It was high-performance insulation, centuries ahead of its time. Because a real thatched roof is not just a pile of straw thrown together. It is an engineered thermal system, sometimes 18 inches thick, built from hollow reeds and straw stalks that naturally trap millions of tiny air pockets. And in building science, air pockets are everything. They are what give insulation its power. 10 inches of thatch delivers an R value of roughly 26.6. To put that in perspective, you would need 7 inches of modern high-density fiberglass to match it. Medieval engineers were achieving the same thermal efficiency using nothing but plants, rope, and skill, long before we wrapped our homes in artificial chemicals and plastic. But the true brilliance of thatch lies in something modern insulation struggles with: breathability. A thatched roof allows moisture to escape while holding heat inside, creating a warm, dry microclimate beneath it. And when nature tested this design, it passed with flying colours. During a violent storm in Ireland in 1998, winds over 100 miles per hour, tile roofs shattered, slate roofs peeled away, but thatched roofs, anchored with rods and wire lattices, stood firm against the chaos. Here's where the irony cuts deep. Historically, many cities banned thatch because of fire fears, and yet today, scientists point out that with modern fire retardants, a thatched roof is actually less likely to ignite than many petroleum-based asphalt shingles. The material we once feared has become safer than the material we replaced it with. So we traded a renewable, biodegradable, high-performance roof for toxic petroleum sheets that crack, off-gas chemicals, and need replacing every couple of decades. The medieval world understood the secret modern builders are slowly rediscovering. Sometimes the future is hiding in the past, and sometimes the smartest technology doesn't come from a factory, but from a field. And the next medieval innovation is even more surprising. Part 5. Trick number 4. The clockwise spiral. Architecture as a weapon. If you've ever climbed a spiral staircase in a medieval castle and felt slightly off balance, that wasn't poor design. It was strategy cold, calculated, and deadly. Medieval builders understood something modern architects rarely consider. Every inch of a structure can be turned into an advantage. Look closely at almost any surviving castle tower, and you'll notice one consistent pattern. The staircase twists clockwise as it rises. To most of us, that seems trivial, but in a world where survival depended on inches, angles, and timing, it was pure battlefield geometry. Since the vast majority of people throughout history have been right-handed, a defender descending the stairs held the upper hand, literally. Their sword arms swung freely on the outside curve of the staircase, giving them full reach and momentum. Meanwhile, the attacker fighting upward had their sword arm pinned against the central pillar, forced into a cramped, awkward angle. It was like trying to fight while standing inside a narrow closet. And medieval engineers didn't stop there. Some castles intentionally included uneven, trick steps, slightly higher or lower than the rest. The residents knew where they were and could run the staircase at full speed. But an invading soldier, rushing in poor lighting, would stumble just long enough to be cut down before regaining balance. This was not just architecture. This was a weapon carved into stone. It reminds us that medieval survival wasn't only about tools, fire, or food. It was about designing your environment to protect you long before danger even arrived. Every wall, every stair, every angle carried purpose. So the question becomes, with all our modern engineering marvels, have we forgotten how to build with the same foresight? The medieval world didn't just live in their homes, they armed them. And the next forgotten trick proves that medieval genius extended far beyond stone and swords. Part 6. Trick number 5. The unwashed egg. Nature's biological armor. Our next medieval survival trick is so simple, so effective, and so biological that trying to sell it commercially in the United States today could actually get you arrested. Yet in much of Europe, it remains completely normal. Because medieval people understood something we forgot the moment we stepped into the age of shiny packaging and supermarket lighting. They knew that an egg does not need a refrigerator, and the reason lies in one of nature's smallest and smartest defensive systems, the cuticle, also known as the bloom. When a hen lays an egg, she coats it in a thin, protein-rich film. It is invisible to the naked eye, but it seals thousands of microscopic pores in the shell. Those pores are pathways bacteria use to slip inside, especially Salmonella. But as long as the cuticle remains intact, the egg becomes its own biological fortress. Moisture stays in, pathogens stay out, spoilage slows to a crawl. Medieval households didn't have electricity. They didn't need it. They simply stored eggs unwashed in a cool, dry place. And those eggs stayed fresh not for days, but for weeks, sometimes months. Entire winters were survived on the strength of this tiny, natural shield. But then came modern wisdom. We began washing eggs to make them look cleaner, shinier, more appealing on a supermarket shelf. And in that moment, we destroyed the cuticle. We turned a naturally self-preserving food into one completely dependent on the electrical grid. The second an egg is washed, an invisible countdown begins, one that cannot be stopped without refrigeration. So today, in many places, it is illegal to sell an unwashed egg, even though it is nature's original zero-energy food preservation system. And here lies the irony. Medieval peasants worked with biological design, trusting the armor evolution crafted over millions of years. We, meanwhile, regulated ourselves into fragility, turning a resilient food into a vulnerable one. This wasn't superstition. It was science long before science had a name. And the next medieval trick shows that their understanding of natural systems extended far beyond the humble egg. Part 7. Trick number 6. Reed bed and charcoal filtration, nature's kidney. Our next medieval survival trick takes us to the one resource humans cannot live without: water. And as simple as that sounds, history and science both agree, clean water has always been one of humanity's greatest challenges. Today we pour billions into treatment plants, chemical processes, and industrial filtration systems. Yet centuries ago, without electricity, without laboratories, medieval communities achieved something astonishing. They created living, self-regenerating water purifiers, systems built not from steel, but from biology. They called upon the quiet power of reeds. If you've ever walked by a pond and seen tall reeds swaying in the wind, you probably didn't realize you were looking at one of nature's most effective filtration engines. Medieval people discovered that by planting reeds in strategic beds near their water sources, the roots formed dense, fibrous networks, underground networks that acted like biological sponges. Bacteria living on those roots broke down pathogens. The stems trapped silt, debris, and impurities, and the water that emerged on the other side was dramatically cleaner, clearer, and safer. But they didn't stop with reeds. For an even finer purification, they added one more layer: charcoal. Charcoal, even in its simplest form, is a scientific marvel. It is filled with microscopic pores capable of absorbing toxins, chemicals, and organic contaminants. When medieval families layered charcoal with sand, they created what is essentially an ancient version of a modern carbon filter, one that could turn murky river water into drinkable, life-sustaining hydration. No electricity, no chemicals, no moving parts, just biology and physics working quietly together. And here comes the twist. Try building a reed bed filtration system in many countries today, and you'll run into a fortress of regulations, inspections, and environmental codes that label these systems as non-compliant. Despite being effective for hundreds of years, despite functioning with zero energy, they are often restricted or outright banned. So instead, we rely on massive, energy-hungry infrastructure that collapses the moment the grid goes down. But medieval people knew a different truth, that nature already invented the perfect filter long before humans did. They simply listened and used it. And the next survival trick shows that their mastery of natural engineering extended even to something as essential as fire. Part 8. Trick number 7. The charcloth fire insurance. Our next medieval survival trick revolves around something so fundamental, so ancient, that without it civilization would never have existed: fire. But fire in the Middle Ages wasn't romantic, and it wasn't optional. It was life itself: warmth, cooking, protection, survival. And because of that, medieval people developed a tool so reliable that even our modern lighters look fragile by comparison. They created charcloth, the original fire insurance. Now, charcloth didn't require fancy equipment or chemicals. It started with something humble: old scraps of linen. Medieval families would pack those rags into a small tin with a single pinhole, then place it in the coals of a fire. As the cloth heated, it released smoke, moisture, and impurities. When the smoking stopped, what remained was a delicate, carbonized fabric capable of catching even the faintest spark from flint and steel. And that was the genius. A spark barely visible to the eye, something too small to ignite dry grass, would sink into the charcloth and bloom into a glowing ember. No lighter fluid, no chemical ignition, just a steady, predictable fire starter that could last for months. If it got wet, you simply dried it. If it was used up, you made more with almost anything woven from natural fibers. While modern lighters run out of fuel, break when dropped, jam in the cold, or refuse to spark when damp, charcloth remained loyal. It turned marginal materials into dependable fire. Every medieval household carried it because in a world without electricity, losing fire could mean losing everything. Yet today, making charcloth the traditional way, over an open flame, is often illegal. Urban fire codes, national park regulations, and safety standards classify these small, controlled burns as prohibited. Instead, we are told to buy approved lighters. disposable gadgets that fail under pressure and must be replaced again and again. Medieval people carried fire in their pockets, renewable, repairable, and free. We carry plastic that runs out when we need it most. And as we move deeper into their forgotten survival systems, one thing becomes clear. The medieval world didn't wait for rescue. They built resilience into every object they touched. Part 9. Trick number 8. The 50-year coat. Fulling wool. Our next medieval survival trick asks a simple question. Why did their clothing last a lifetime, while ours barely survives 2 winters? The answer lies in a forgotten craft, one so effective that the modern textile industry quietly avoids it. It was called fulling. In the medieval world, wool was not simply woven and stitched. It underwent a transformation. Clothmakers soaked the wool in water, then mechanically agitated it, kneading, pounding, pressing, until the microscopic scales on each wool fiber locked tightly together. What emerged from this process was a fabric so dense, so durable, that it became naturally windproof and resistant to rain. But the real magic came from what they didn't remove. Modern manufacturers strip wool of its natural oils to make it feel soft and clean. Medieval craftsmen understood better. They kept the lanolin, the waxy, water-repelling substance that sheep produce to stay dry in storms. Lanolin turned a simple wool coat into a weatherproof shield long before chemical sprays and synthetic membranes existed. A fulled wool coat wasn't fashion. It was armor against the cold. It was an investment meant to be repaired, passed down, and worn for 50 years or more. And here is where the story takes a darker turn. This method didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it worked too well. Modern textile companies thrive on rapid turnover, seasonal trends, disposable fabrics, planned obsolescence. We produce more than 90 million tons of textile waste every year, not because materials have failed us, but because we have forgotten how to make materials that last. Medieval people wrapped themselves in clothing engineered by nature and strengthened by human craft. We wrap ourselves in fabric destined for a landfill. Their secret wasn't magic, it was commitment. Commitment to durability, to repair, to building something once and building it right. And the next medieval survival trick shows that this mindset extended even to how they preserved food in a world without refrigeration. Part 10. Trick number 9. Ash preservation and garam. Turning decay into survival. Our next medieval survival trick forces us to confront a question that every pre-electric society had to answer. How do you keep meat fresh when there is no freezer, no icebox, and no margin for error? For medieval peasants, the solution began right where their fire ended, inside the ashes of their hearth. Fresh meat was packed directly into plain wood ash, a substance with a pH between 10 and 12. To put that in perspective, that is nearly as alkaline as bleach. And in such an environment, bacteria don't merely slow down, they die on contact. The microbes that spoil meat are like vampires exposed to sunlight. The alkalinity destroys them instantly. With nothing more than a layer of ash, meat could remain safe for up to 3 weeks. No refrigeration, no salt mines, just chemistry harnessed by people who didn't know the word chemistry, yet understood its power intimately. But preservation wasn't their only trick. The medieval world mastered the art of turning waste into nourishment through one of history's most misunderstood foods, garama, fermented fish sauce with a smell so intense that the church banned its production in many towns, declaring it sinful. Yet modern scientists have revealed what medieval cooks already knew. This pungent sauce was a nutritional powerhouse. The fermentation process flooded it with natural glutamates, the same compounds that give modern MSG its savory depth, and packed it with probiotics that aided digestion. What began as rotting fish scraps transformed into a high-protein, gut-healing elixir that fueled armies, preserved food, and elevated even the simplest meals. So while modern households rely on fragile supply chains and energy-hungry appliances, medieval families relied on nature's chemistry, using ash as an antiseptic shield and fermentation as a biological engine. Once again, the pattern emerges. They survived not because they had more, but because they understood more, turning the elements around them into tools of resilience. And their final survival trick reveals that their greatest weapon wasn't physical at all, but human. Part 1. A world without a switch. Imagine this, April 28, 2025. The lights flicker and die. Across Germany, metro lines freeze mid-tunnel. Across Spain, taps run dry. Supermarkets seal shut, phone networks collapse, and as darkness falls, millions sit in a silence so heavy it feels alive. No heat, no internet, no light. We call this a disaster, a grid failure. But to a medieval peasant, this wasn't catastrophe, it was normal life. While we panic in the dark, checking dead phones and watching food spoil, our ancestors would barely have raised an eyebrow. And that's because the story we were taught about them is wrong. The Middle Ages were not an era of stagnation. Modern thermodynamics, building science, and microbiology now reveal something astonishing. Medieval people weren't primitive, they were brilliant. They built homes that heated themselves, preserved food without electricity, purified water using biology instead of chemicals, and designed tools so efficient that many are now restricted or outright banned by modern regulations. So today, we're uncovering 10 medieval survival tricks that the modern world forgot, but scientists now say were pure genius. From stone heat batteries that outperform today's furnaces to architectural weapons built into castle walls, these methods didn't just help people survive harsh centuries, they helped them thrive. This is more than history. This is a blueprint for resilience in a fragile modern world. Welcome to Historia Prime. Let's bring the forgotten wisdom back to life. Part 12. Conclusion. The wisdom of being ready. So, what have we learned on this journey back through time? That the medieval world wasn't dark because it lacked electricity. It was resilient because it didn't depend on it. Medieval people built their lives around natural systems instead of mechanical ones. They understood the steady warmth hidden in the earth beneath their feet. They trusted the biological armor nature placed on an egg. They wielded the chemistry of ash, the breathability of thatch, the physics of stone, and the strength of human cooperation. They didn't see themselves as separate from nature, forever fighting against it. They saw themselves as part of its rhythm, listening, adapting, and surviving through its harshest seasons. But modernity, for all its miracles, has quietly taken something from us. It has given us comfort at the cost of resilience. It has handed us convenience while teaching us dependency. We let our systems carry us so completely that many of us no longer remember how to stand on our own. So now ask yourself honestly, if the lights went out tonight, truly out, not for minutes but for days, would you know how to warm a room without electricity? Would you know how to find clean water if the taps ran dry? Would your neighbors become allies or strangers behind closed doors? Because the true genius of the Middle Ages is not nostalgia, it is a blueprint, a reminder that the tools we need for the future may already be hiding in the past. The world is unpredictable, and shocks, whether from nature, technology, or society, may come when we least expect them. But knowledge is a form of power that never goes dark. If this journey through forgotten wisdom has opened your eyes, tap that like button. It signals to the algorithm that this kind of knowledge should be preserved, not buried. And remember to subscribe to Historia Prime for more lost technologies hidden science, and the lessons our ancestors left behind. The lights might go out, but the knowledge must stay burning. Until next time, stay wise.